Welcome back to Seaweed Brain, a Percy Jackson podcast, live still from Aiea. We are continuing Odyssey Summer, Witch Summer, Questing Summer. We are still covering Circe by Madeline Miller. This is the 5th installment, I believe, in our Circe series, and it is time for motherhood. Stick around.
Welcome back, everybody, to Seaweed Brain, live from Aiea. We know that's not how you pronounce the name of Circe's island, but that is how you pronounce the neighborhood Carter is from on our island. We are welcoming back to the podcast today to talk about chapters 18 to 22 of Circe. It's Jenny K. Jaw, live from, do we dox you? Australia.
Live from Australia. Not as exciting as Aiea.
The big country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I can totally say that's so nice of you to worry about. But we did have a fan meetup here in Perth, Australia, and it was so wonderful. So people know I'm in Western Australia. I'm in like literally one of the smallest towns in Western Australia. It's been well, actually, it's very apt because I'm on an island. Hey, it's a big island. It's nothing like Aiea. And it's pretty magical. And there's lots of wildlife here, dangerous wildlife that will kill you if you're not careful. Oh my gosh. Separate podcast reserved for just all the wildlife that I've encountered since I've come to Western Australia.
Really quickly, favorite animal you've seen?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Or like most horrifying animal you've seen.
Okay. Most horrifying animal I've seen is probably the spiders. 0 out of 10 do not recommend huntsman spiders. They're the size of your fist. No, bigger. Maybe the size of your face if you have a smaller face like I do. And best animal I've seen split between Gala cockatoos, which are stunning pink birds that just like you walk out the door and there's just 40 of them in the front yard.
Pretty.
It's the most incredible thing. And then also magpies. I love magpies. They're just the most like Australian kind of bird, but they have this beautiful like singing, and it really like feels like singing, which unlike a lot of the birds in Los Angeles, not to, they're fine. They're great.
I love that you mentioned 2 birds as your favorite animals that you've seen, because I, for a long time now, have been an aspiring birder, and I'm starting to take it more seriously. I'm starting to...
You have the notebook now?
Well, there's apps, right? There's great apps,
apps
now where you can take a photo of a bird and it'll tell you what that bird species is, or you can do a recording. So you can record the call and then it will identify the bird, and then you can like log where you saw it and when. And I'm starting to look forward to how I'm going to take up birding in New York City when I'm back. This has been a goal of mine for a very long time, to be one of those people that's bird watching in Prospect Park. And now that is where you will find me, bird watching in Prospect Park. So thank you for bringing birds to the table today. That's probably the last mention of birds today. I don't think we can necessarily force these chapters to be about birds, but I'm glad we got an opportunity to talk about them at least a little bit.
We'll have to wing it. We'll find a way to bring it in.
There we go.
As our friend Caleb always said, put one fist on your chest and wing it.
Oh, heck yeah. I love that. I'm going to steal that. Thank you, Caleb.
This is an audio medium, but if you are listening to this, please try it. Put one fist on your chest.
As in, raise and lower your elbow. That's the motion we're making.
Like a chicken wing. Jenny, everybody knows that you are a big Greek myth nerd as a singer-songwriter who often is creating content about mythology and about antiquity. Would you tell us briefly your background with when you first read this book, why you're here to talk about it today? And we're also going to ask you for a one-word description of the book. Like if you had to take all of the themes of the book and say, no, this one word is what this book is about. There's no right answer. It's just your personal opinion.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to talk about Circe. Thank you for having me, first of all. Such a big fan of the podcast, but you guys definitely know that. Circe, not to be dramatic, but it definitely changed the trajectory of my life.
Snaps.
It's one of the best books I've ever read, probably like top 3, honestly. So I'd read the Song of Achilles first, and again, love Song of Achilles, like stunning, phenomenal book. That book has like a very special place in my heart. And then I read Circe after, and this was like, I want to say 4 years ago. So this was a while ago. This was before I started my career as a songwriter or dovetailing, like when I was first starting to put out songs. And I remember reading Circe and just being floored by the humanness of it all. And I just was so intrigued and compelled by how Madeline Miller plays with the mythos in such an interesting way. Like she is not afraid to take big risks and fill in gaps in the literature and in the source material and bend things to her will but in a way that feels very accurate. So when you're reading it, you're like, wow, this is literally new mythology that I'm reading. Like, I've never read these stories before. All of the themes, and I'm sure we'll delve into that, like every time she's expounding on a myth or creating a new myth, it still feels very like rooted in the themes that are prevalent in ancient Greek literature, but then somehow also really fresh and new and then like relatable. So yeah, it really just stuck with me. And this like central question that Circe has throughout the book of like her fascination with humanness and what separates a human from a god, that's just like a really fascinating question. And yeah, so I think the word I'll pick is human.
Brilliant. Human.
I've already forgotten, but somebody in our first episode picked that word. One of the three of us.
No way.
I think so too.
Was it?
It might have been you. I don't know.
Have. Who knows at this point?
We've all those variations on
What
the
an
same
honor.
words. We'll like track in and we'll make a little chart at the end once we finish our last episode next week. Absolutely beautiful. I couldn't agree more. We're huge fans of this book. The section we get to talk about today is, as Carter mentioned, it's the motherhood section. Becoming a single mother, Athena, and protecting her son. And as we start to talk about that single mothering, I just want to give Carter the floor to talk about what single motherhood means to you. As of, like, when I think about single moms, I think about Carter, because Carter, as long as I can remember, has always wanted to be a single mom. The beauty and the power of what it means to be a single mom, raising your child, and like maybe all of this originated, correct me if I'm wrong, Carter, but maybe all of this originated with Regina Mills in Once Upon a Time, the original single mom raising her adopted son in the ABC TV show Once Upon a Time.
That was a major influence. I don't know if I can say that there's a precise origin point, and I will say that I am not the greatest spokesperson for the cause, because at this point I'm planning on non-single
Co-parenting?
motherhood, co-parenting, but I do believe in it strongly as an idea, as something that is exemplified by people. I feel like Lucy Liu is just a human person, not in any particular role, as an icon of single motherhood. Minnie Kaling, I think she's single mothering. There are a lot of details about her parenting situation that are not known to the public, but it really seems like she's single mothering and has talked about that publicly in a way that I really appreciate it. Yeah, no, more people should be single mothers. I really believe these are going to be good chapters for that reason.
These are good chapters for that reason. Regina Mills comes to mind for me. I was going to say the baker's wife in Into the Woods, but she dies.
I really like Reba McEntire.
A single mom who works two jobs.
Single mom who works two jobs.
This section is not Circe. This section is Reba.
The Reba McEntire.
Yes.
I'm obsessed, please.
So we open up this section by Circe standing on the beach, seeing Odysseus like fade off into the distance, and immediately, bam, pregnancy. And much like we talked about the grotesquerie and the disgustingness of Pasiphae's childbirth, this whole section of like pregnancy through childbirth is painful, nasty, awful, horrific. We are separating Circe from her nymph background and from her Titan godly heritage by saying that most nymphs have this perfect, glowing, easy pregnancy, and she had basically the opposite experience. Did you guys feel like there was a reason for this other than setting her apart and making her feel, again, less godly, more mortal in her pregnancy being so difficult and so ugly?
I think that there is something to the gender play here as well, that this is part of setting her relationship to femininity in contrast to what is common and what she sees around her, that childbirth doesn't come naturally to her. And I feel like in her processing of it, that's part of what's going on, that this isn't something she's been aspiring to. This isn't something that she has strong pre-existing positive associations with, the way that maybe a lot of the nymphs that she's seen have had. I think it is also entirely possible that Circe is not a reliable narrator here, and that she has just been profoundly uncurious about other nymphs and their experiences of pregnancy, in much the same way that, I don't know, I feel like if we hadn't been there when Pasiphae had given birth, don't we feel like Circe would have strongly assumed that Pasiphae had a glowing, beautiful, perfect, easy, happy childbirth, because she is, a woman who loves motherhood and has a different relationship to men than Circe. Circe would be like,
Pasiphae was waking up glowing every morning, not aware or not stopping to think that Pasiphae was waking up and applying vitamin C serum all over her body so that she would look cleaner. That thought wouldn't cross her mind.
I feel like that's also part of it, is that Circe's having this child in an environment where there's no performance to be done. There's no witnesses. There's no male gaze anywhere. She's just going to experience her emotions fully, do what minimizes the pain of the process.
Yeah.
And it's also implied that it is Athena who is interfering and causing this pregnancy to be more difficult. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Or at least she thinks that it is. Because when she prays to the goddess of childbirth, she's
Yeah.
like sensing that someone is trying to harm her son. Did you guys also
Yeah.
think a lot of Sally Jackson during this section?
Oh, the whole time.
Childbirth section?
Everything,
Or just
yeah.
generally?
I mean, generally, but yeah, especially right now.
Well, absolutely. First of all, yes. And like generally Circe and Sally Jackson exist in one place and they occupy the same space of my brain. But I will say that Telegonus does not occupy the same space in my brain that Percy Jackson occupies, unfortunately. But that's, no slight to Telegonus.
Yeah.
exactly. But what I love about this chapter is how it starts. I think that this is such a interesting framing mechanism. How would the songs frame the scene? It's so sarcastic and biting. What I really appreciate about this is like the honesty of childbirth, and anxieties around childbirth are such a important part of the human mortal female experience in ancient Greece. Like so much of the record keeping around what we know about women at this time is like how anxious they were around childbirth, how much they would pray to the goddess of childbirth, how there were multiple goddesses who were tasked with protecting women through childbirth because it was just such a important task. And I feel like this is a moment where we see that mortal side shine through. And just like the level of detail we get is just very accurate to like how a lot of human women experience pregnancies, and especially complicated pregnancies. But this very biting framing mechanism of like, oh, so, I'm a goddess and how would the songs frame this? Probably not accurately. And I think Carter, your note about there being some kind of like unreliable narrator thing happening here is also very apt in that way too.
It is like played out to the nines. Like not only is she a single mother, but because we're in this like heightened circumstance, she's experiencing single motherhood on like the maximum 100% level because there is nobody else here. She is completely alone. So she's experiencing everything like at extremes. The quote I really liked from this section was page 239, the child I carried would be called a demigod, but that word was deceiving. From my blood, he would have a few special graces, beauty or speed, strength or charm, but all the rest would come from his father, for mortality always bred truer than godhead. That line I liked a lot. Whether or not that's a statement or that's just something that Circe feels, I thought a lot of Sally, and that what makes Percy the hero that he is nothing to do with the powers he gets from his father, but entirely to do with the way his mother raised him and the genes that he got from her.
Yeah.
Which I also like that you can't.
That's incredible.
Yeah, if you think about all of the classic Greek heroes throughout antiquity, you can't blame necessarily their assholery on their godly parent, but to think about the other parent and the way that they were raised and maybe the way they were treated is very interesting. It puts more mortality onto these like great figures, and even like Odysseus himself, like that he wasn't necessarily the weird kind of guy he was because of his blood from Hermes, that is like that's who he is.
Yeah,
that's in his mortal genes.
In a book that focuses so much on prophecy, and also in a 2025 where cultural production is potentially going to become a deterministic machine function, I do feel like it is valuable to correctly or incorrectly ascribe so much of, like, say that these like primordial forces that people are swimming in are not as determinative as to how things end up as compared to randomness and circumstance and other more precise specific forms of context.
Yeah, I would like to have the conversation though, since we're talking about this entire section as a whole. Like, who do you think Telegonus takes after more?
To me, it's like when I made that kind of comment about Telegonus and Telemachus having similar names that probably are almost like meant to sound similar to each other.
Yeah.
Just like Telemachus bases his identity off of not Odysseus, but the legends of Odysseus and the idea that he creates in his head about Odysseus. I feel like Telegonus is exactly the same. Like, I think if we have to think about who he takes after nobody, literally.
Hey.
Odyssey joke. But he takes after this exalted image that he has of his father, which is I think what makes what happens in this section. I remember when I read it the first time, it's such a gut punch because you just feel this like this is his Telegonus's entire life has led to the moment where he gets to see if his father lives up to the ideas that he's created in his head. And I also just separately just thinking about like the gender of it all, like how fascinating is it that the absence of his father is potentially more impactful in Telegonus's identity than the presence of his mother, who is like a very doting, caring, comforting mother. I just find that interesting.
Absolutely makes me think of Percy. That when you have this absent parent, you spend so much of your time like putting ideas onto that, and then when you find out that parent is famous or a god, you spend so much time thinking about that parent and how that parent influences your life, and putting so much weight onto like every minor interaction you have with that parent. Meanwhile, the single mom who's raising you is the one who's really influencing you.
A lot of the trajectory, I think, does. I mean, we've already brought up Regina Mills, mentioned number one, and I think it's gonna keep happening because this literally is. It's not just single mother. It's which single mother. It is single mother whose child is trying to escape into immediate danger, and whose life is a pawn, or like whose life exists as a tool to use to threaten their mother.
Rapunzel. Let's
Rapunzel, Into the Woods. Let's lay them all out. Lay them all out now.
Yeah.
It is the witch from Into the Woods. It is Regina Mills from Once Upon a Time. We could name others. I actually don't know if I can name others. Those are so strongly.
Can you count Mother Gothel? She's just pure evil.
No,
same story, different character.
Yeah. Obviously, they're all like from the same origin root of Germanic folktale, but I really feel like those are two tellings that are really ringing. Like every line, I'm half processing and half actually just replacing mentally with something that Stephen Sondheim.
What about Hazel Levesque's mother?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
More on the spectrum towards Mother Gothel than towards Regina Mills.
Yeah, it's tough because we never learn that much about her.
Yeah.
And we never get to hear her talk from, her own perspective really about why she did the things that she did.
But there is a difference between the single mom and the single witch mom, because even though Telegonus is born of like, he wasn't made as a spell. He was a perfectly normal conceived child. There is this aspect of like, I am going against nature. And I'm saying this in a, with air quotes kind of a way, like as a single mom, who's like going against societal expectations of co-parenting this child. And also as a witch who defies the physical laws of nature, I am going against the norm to like raise this child. And that is going to be perceived as something that's very dangerous and grotesque and unnatural.
Yeah.
This is also now as good a time as any to say, this to me is like the loneliness section of this book. Like we almost got the loneliness section last week, but then Odysseus kind of swooped in to be, what was this? He was fourth boyfriend, right?
Oh yeah. She has Hermes. She has Daedalus.
Glaucus,
Hermes,
Daedalus,
Odysseus. Yes.
Should we snog, marry, avoid all of her boyfriends at some point? Should we play a game
Did you say
of like
stalk, marry, avoid?
Oh no. First of all, that's a separately wonderful game.
I've never heard that.
Saying, I don't know why I said snog. That's because I've been watching too much Love Island. That's definitely why. I meant kiss, marry, avoid.
Kiss, marry, avoid. That's such a cute way of saying that I've never heard before. But now that you've said it, we need to do it right now. Kiss, marry, avoid some combination of the four boyfriends up to this point.
I feel like on one level, the answer is avoid all of them and protect your peace. And on another level, the correct answer is kiss all of them and have experiences that shape and define you and help you make better decisions in the future.
Okay, Madeline Miller.
Okay, Madeline Miller.
That's what Madeline would say. I want to hear what Carter has to say.
As they're written in this book, I think the answer to me is unambiguously kiss Hermes, marry Daedalus, avoid the other two.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm going to throw a spanner in the works and say I'm going to switch Odysseus and Hermes. That's it. Yeah.
Understandable.
They're honestly kind of interchangeable. One's just a god and the other one's got a lot of scars on his hands. But I think for the purposes of that, they're interchangeable. Well, loneliness. She's struggling with it because her fourth boyfriend left. And she wants to be an independent woman on her island. But as Saoirse Ronan in 2019 would tell us, I'm so lonely. I believe that women have hearts,
as well as minds,
and brains as well as just beauty. And I'm so sick of people telling me that love is all a woman is fit for. But I'm so
sick
lonely.
Of it. Yeah.
So what are we going to do? We're going to fill that void with a child. Again, the witch single mother. If nobody else will accept me, one thing I can have is my baby and my child who will stand by me. This is such a fraught stereotype that is so exciting to read from the perspective of the woman, right? Because it's so dangerous to get into that territory and be like, evil mother overprotecting her child because stay with me, the world outside is dark and wild.
It's like evil mother, but in all of the stories that we have mentioned, the positive assessment of the world and the dangers that exist is always correct. In Into the Woods, she does die not a year after she finally starts living on her own for the first time.
Yeah.
Which is like not to say that the witch's decision was right, but just to be like, I don't know. Like I think that what you're saying is right, that we're getting a window into non-normative parenting, non-normative ways of forming social bonds. The other, I don't know, but potentially like the most modern incarnation of this that I'm actually thinking about is the Acolyte, where instead of doing witch single mother, it is coven motherhood. It is going to the feminist commune where you magically conceive immaculately children out of the air, and still it's not enough. And I think what you watch in all these stories is this sort of like some of this weird interplay between inherent loneliness and curiosity in children and this seep of this social poison against what it is that single motherhood entails and the transgressions that are involved in that. Like I think that you can really see it in the section that we're about to get to, where she's telling all these stories about Odysseus, and there's this creep in through that of gender and heroism and all these ideas that I think make it really difficult for Telegonus to just aspire to be like Circe, in addition to the material conditions of he's trapped with her, he is going to want to do his own thing eventually. I don't know. It seems like she cannot help herself but to produce this idea of a classical Greek hero that is elsewhere for him to aspire to, and that ends up posing a huge challenge to her sense of, like, I don't know, authority and completeness and her validity, I guess, as a single mother and someone who could provide a world.
In the outline, I know Carter and I were both meditating on this idea of Circe giving birth to Telegonus and raising Telegonus. Is his cool gay mom has really straight son, and that is hard. That's really
exactly
difficult.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
You were thinking that this child was going to be like created in your own image to an extent. You knew that he was going to take after his father more than he took after you, but you're like seeking this thing that will live outside of society with you, that will cure your loneliness because it will be external as well, and you two will be external together. And then all that child wants to do is live like a heteronormative life with people and be this hero. The hardest part of this section is how much she blames herself for putting those ideas into his head by not telling him the truth about Odysseus.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like, I mean, I don't know that it's a productive question to ask, but do you feel like had she told him the truth that he would have felt differently about his father? Or that like we are to just feel like as a young boy, like he was always going to envision this like hero in his dad, and he was always going to want to go out there because that's who her son is. And that was not the answer to her loneliness all along, was to have this boy. Like he was never hers to keep.
I think it's both. I think that both the things you said are true, that he was probably always going to want to leave, and that he isn't hers to keep, and that even if there are all these risks, he is, like, as he says dramatically at the end of the section, like, it's still going to be worth it for him to try to have new experiences and to build his own life. But at the same time, the children do listen. And I feel like she wasn't in her, what analogy? Like in her Zoe Nightshade, I guess, bag of trying to be defensive and proactive about establishing what, I mean, it's weird because like he's described as being really moralistic, which is a good thing, but I feel like there was room for improvement. in my opinion. Not to criticize her single parenting, but
Wow,
to
Carter.
a little
Yeah.
bit be
Wow.
like,
She's doing her best.
she is doing
She's
her
a
best.
single mom.
And like, yeah, like I think
Works
there's
two
no way for her to understand what the counterfactual would be. And she does work two jobs. She's also busy putting up all these protection spells and trying to, make clothes and do all of this. But I don't know. I feel like the idealization feels like a knowable, preventable mistake where his behavior might not have changed, but his perspective on the world and I think his ability to appreciate what's wrong out there, what she's trying to do, how he's making her feel might be better if she were just a little more straightforward and took some heroes to task.
I completely agree with literally everything that you just said, Carter. And I think that it's fascinating that Circe herself falls victim to the thing that she does not like about the relationship between the mortals and the gods is this like blind idealization. And like that's all of these little snarky remarks, not just in these passages, but throughout the book about like, how would they write about this? What would the song say about this? Like, this is what she is doing.
And she turns around and does the same thing.
Exactly. And we see it unfold in real time. Like, you create an image of somebody that person is never, ever going to live up to. And the kind of disappointment that creates for a young kid or just anyone. And so you're right. Like, it is funny that we see Circe fall victim to this. But also what I agree with you about, Carter, is that Telegonus, I think Madeline Miller goes to great lengths to show that Telegonus is separately a strong personality, because I think the biggest sign that we get of that is that in his literal infancy, he is like loud and like he's just such a, you know what I mean? Like, he's just such a personality at such a young age. So I think we are meant to assume as the reader that there is an inevitability to this, that like he was just always going to want something more than what Circe could provide. But I think, and not to fast forward in the conversation to what happens with Athena, but I think what I absolutely love about this moment with Athena, and just like this decision that Circe makes, like this decision to me is the crux of the book. And I think why it was so important to Madeline Miller to frame the book through the lens of Prometheus, because Prometheus makes the choice for the gods to preserve an imperfect human race, a race that is like ungrateful and like not necessarily like they were just going to start a new human race, right? Like Zeus was going to like wash everyone away and then keep making iterations of humans until they were perfect. But I think Prometheus choosing to protect imperfect humans is Circe's decision to, because that's what Athena offers her, right? She says, hey, like, if you give me Telegonus, then I will give you a perfect hero. And Circe says, no, I don't want the perfect hero. I want my imperfect son. And she consciously makes that choice, even knowing, and that's why I think it's important that we get these passages of Telegonus being such a strong personality. We get these glimpses from her eyes that she knows Telegonus is never going to be the son that she 100% wants, but it doesn't matter to her, because that is what motherhood is.
Yeah.
Period. Oh, I love that connection. I did not make that connection between the framing of Prometheus and then what she decides to do, and whether or not she does that consciously because he is her hero. Who knows? But that conversation absolutely influenced her.
Is this our cue to take a break and then go to Athena?
Yes, let's take a break and then let's say hello to Mother.
You said mother, but Circe very quickly in this conversation says she is no mother. This is a childless cat lady. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Okay, let's read her entrance, shall we? Page 247.
Oh, I love this.
I need no shadows. The voice sliced the air, and it is not for such as you to question my purposes. She struck the room, tall and straight and sudden white, a talon of lightning in the midnight sky. Her horsehair helmet brushed the ceiling. Her mirror armor threw off sparks. The spear in her hand was long and thin, its keen edge limed in firelight. She was burning certainty, and before her all the shuffling and the stained dross of the world must shrink away. Zeus's bright and favorite child, Athena. What I desire will come to pass. There is no mitigation. Dang. That, to me, of all the descriptions I've read of Athena, is the most Zeus-like. I think Madeline Miller is going to great pains to paint her as the progeny of Zeus. She is flickering with lightning. She strikes the room like a lightning bolt. And she is cold and harsh like he is, and she is not a mother. You're right. I take it back. She's the opposite of that. She is barren and evil.
The things that I remember the most from this section are, number one, this gaggy, horrifying introduction. And number two, the way that Circe's kind of takeaway is basically like, it feels like such an inversion to have Circe, this person who I think we would all characterize as being at the margins of our understanding of Greek civilization and at the margins of mythology. Like she is one of the kind of villains poking in from the edges of the stories, like making her critique of Athena, who is very close to the core, true, ideal, infallible person in a lot of these stories, with all the flaws that we do know that she has in Ariadne and all, like she's like a known person with flaws. But for Circe's critique of Athena to be, she doesn't have kids, she doesn't get it, she's not human enough, I found so fascinating. It is such a judo-esque move of Circe to be like, actually, I am the core of the human experience. You are the margin of the human experience, in a way that is successful, but also, I don't, like, is it a radical progressive act to say, like, actually, we're switching positions, but the reason we're switching positions is because I know about motherhood and you don't? I don't know. Like, there's the way that Athena is painted here is someone who, like, Circe ascribes it to her non-motherhood, but then Athena is painted here as knowing so little about humans and human emotions that she would earnestly believe that replacing a child with a future different child after she kills the current child would be satisfactory and agreeable to the mother of an infant child. Like, that goes, I think, beyond just being calculating and goes to the place of, like, Athena is so disconnected from human relations that she can't even, like, have an accurate mental model of what people value about childbirth and motherhood and connection. I found it to be a very extreme characterization, but effective for what the book is trying to do. What did everyone else feel about this?
That's also how I felt. I felt like it was, like you said, a very extreme portrayal. And I think things that really stick out to me in this depiction of Athena is color and all of this metal imagery. It's like, I just noticed all of these moments, like the shearing of something about like a voice, like shearing metal or something. And then all of this, like it's so gray and she was armored from head to foot.
Industrial versus natural world.
Exactly. You're so exactly right. And it's so artificial and very inhuman for somebody to be portrayed as very gray and like lacking color. That's just kind of what I noticed. Well, here's the thing is, like, I love it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, like, we are gagging.
Like, I'm not complaining, but the way that she describes her as the goddess of argument. Oh my God, when I read that for the first time, I like triple highlighted, circled, because I just had never heard Athena described like that. And like, there's so many other things that you would say, right? Like, the goddess of war, the goddess of strategic thinking, the goddess of wisdom. Maybe, right? Like, maybe the goddess of war, you would say, instead of the goddess of wisdom. But like, the goddess of argument. What a fascinating word.
That's just like, let me play devil's advocate. The goddess of let me play devil's advocate real quick, which is not a polite framing. Not really the best way we could describe her. I'm thinking, Carter, about what you've said the past few episodes about the way that every other woman is described in this book. That, like, for a book about a woman and like the woman experience, that like there is such a harshness put on every other female character and that she doesn't necessarily understand them or feel like she can align with them until we get to Penelope next week. But this is such a great example of, I'm not saying that she is not literally her enemy in this moment and trying to steal her child, but that there was an extreme inability to connect with a fellow woman in this moment. And I really also like what we've got in the outline about the inversion of, here comes the goddess trying to steal the witch's child, as opposed to this is the witch trying to take away the princess's child. Who's the villain here? Who's doing the taking? And why?
I struggled with this passage for the reasons I laid out, but also the like material of their conversation is worth taking a beat on. So the reason why Athena's here is because she knows something about prophecy. There are some limitations that she has, but she also believes that Telegonus is going to do something bad in the future. It's very vague at this point, but what she does is essentially enter into this negotiation with Circe that touches on like Titan Olympian relations And some of the metaphysics of what Athena's allowed to do, like she's allowed to send snakes, but she can't directly strike at the child, or like she can make bowls fall down, but she can't I don't know. What we're presented with in her dialogue is like a weirdly like weak hand and a weirdly strange ability to guess what Circe is going to know or do or react to anything. At times it took me out a little bit to see Athena just kind of being like, silence, accept my demands. I'm stronger than you would ever know. As opposed to like, I don't know, like negotiating back or being like, okay, you think this thing about Titan Olympian relations, but actually I'm going to call your bluff. And there's this other figure who you didn't know about who I have been strategizing. Like it was like the strategic blindsiding to me where it's like, oh, Athena, like you didn't figure out that like Helios would launch a war against Zeus.
Yeah, it's very Zeus-like, stubborn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That line about like reason versus wisdom is like interesting to me, but she's not you're right. Like she's not reasoning a ton. The mention of Zeus does make me think when you said devil's advocate, that is like, I think literally what Athena is she's the advocate of Zeus. Some people
Who is
could
the devil?
interpret as the devil, right? In some fandoms. But something I did also want to mention, which I think is something that obviously, and again, I'm the queen of skipping forward, but something that came to mind as we were speaking about how much Circe is, harping on this point of Athena not being a mother herself, being a virgin goddess. What we know as the audience, potentially, if you know the myths, but then what we come to know later is the reason why Athena is so pressed about this child is because of the love that she has for a mortal, is because of the love that she has for Odysseus and for what we know. She sees what will happen, and that is this whole other odd element to this, which is like, what is the fundamental difference? Yes, okay, literally Telegonus is the son of Circe, the biological son, but like they're both doing the same thing. Circe wants to protect her son.
They are both doing the same thing. They're both trying to sacrifice everything and stop at nothing to protect the one soul that they care about.
Who happens to be immortal.
Who both are mortals. Circe says, and male. Athena had no babe, and she never would. Her only love was reason, and that has never been the same as wisdom. I also think feels so purposeful to me that this comes right after our section with Medea, where we are thinking so strongly about the miasma of what it means to kill your children and the curse that brings on, and the kind of like deep darkness that hangs in the air when you commit an act like that. When Medea comes to Aiaia, she hasn't yet killed her kids, but that we know that is, culturally like where that story goes. And so we're thinking about all of that as we get into the section and get this thing handed to us, this opportunity to pass on Telegonus and take a more perfect child. But like, of course she's not going to do that. Like, why would she do that when we're thinking about Medea and like how evil it is to do an act like that would not even cross her mind.
100%.
I wanted to ask, while we're talking about Athena, like portrayal in this book versus her portrayal in the Riordan verse, to me, pretty identical. Like pretty identical, in my opinion. Obviously, Athena has actual mortal children in the Riordan verse, but I do feel like this is a pretty consistent vision. Carter seems to disagree. Speak on it.
I just think the calculating nature overlaps. I just feel like Athena is smarter and knows more things in the Riordan verse. Like, I don't think that Athena, it's harder to imagine her outside of the mark of Athena, where she is, I don't know what term to use, literarily insane. Like, outside of that, it's, I think, hard to imagine her getting so completely outflanked in the way that she does here. Like, overlap, definitely. Coldness.
I agree with you. I think that there are many times in this book, and that's like if I had to pick literally a singular thing about this book, because I love it so much, but like there are a lot of interactions that Circe has with gods where I'm like, really? Like, you disarmed Athena and like 10 sentences like that, really? Like, you got, and what happens later in the section too, there's definitely an element of like, wow, I didn't know Circe was literally the most powerful magical being in the Greek mythology universe, which she's not. But no, I think I'm with you, Carter. I wish we saw more of the wiliness of Athena and the strategicness of her here. And I do love that in the Riordan verse. You get this sense that she's like quietly teaming and scheming all the time whenever we see her. What is funny though, that is similar about these two worlds is that both of them are potentially unreliable narrators. Percy, as the man who's trying to date her daughter, and then Circe.
I feel like we need to discuss your awful second boyfriend coming back to fill your son's head with lies.
Oh, yeah.
And visions of the outside world. This, I could not get over how mad I was.
It was so infuriating.
Yeah. Showing up, not saying hi to you, going straight to talk. Stay away from my son, first of all. Like, did I say you could speak to my son on my own home? No. No permission granted. Filling his head with delusions. Helping him build a boat. Terrifying. I also want to say that, again, was speaking of Sally Jackson, that as Telegonus is growing up and she's telling him the stories of Odysseus and making him out to be a good guy, I thought a lot about Sally and portraying Poseidon as this nice guy who couldn't stay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how much that framed Percy's entire perspective on the Olympians from a young age. And if Percy had grown up with not Sally, but somebody more like May, who was unable to lie like that, that things would have turned in a more Luke direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the real witch mother of it all, where she does the archetypal thing of using her powers from time to time, mostly restraining herself, but every now and then she can't help it. And in the pursuit of safety of the child, to an extent, and there's unreliable narration involved, restraining the child, sedating the child in order to, I don't know, make it through another day, prevent the kid from getting killed. I think it is a pretty well-trodden metaphor that I think we've thought through in the context of all these other properties that we've mentioned.
There felt like a very mortality bent to it. Like, I'm going to make mistakes. Like, I am but a human. In my rearing of this child, I'm going to accidentally push it too far. I think of it as the same trope of yelling, getting really frustrated, and going to be about to hit your kid. And then pulling back.
Yeah.
It's oh, I'm about to cross the line, or I'm going to cross the line. But then you just have to reel it back in and figure out where the line is.
Yeah.
Whether that's magic or anything else.
It is very interesting because it's again, not to call Circe out for being a hypocrite. She's great. I love her.
Oh, do it.
But again, that is the issue that she finds with the gods and the mortals is this power dynamic of literally powers and gods using their powers on innocent mortals who can't fight back. And not that she does, but the fact that she has that impulse is so interesting. That's the godhead in her. That's her father rearing up and telling her, well, you can make it stop. You can enact your will upon this person who can't fight back with their own powers. And it's very telling that she obviously chooses not to, whereas a lot of gods do choose to.
Yes, I love throughout this book, and many times in this section in particular, when her godhead is kind of rearing up, she is personified in some way as either water or heat from either side of her heritage. In this section, she says, I felt myself running with swift, clear rage like a river, And then other times it's her, she's glowing, her eyes are glowing, her skin is emitting heat, she's becoming fiery whenever that godly rage begins to appear. It was kind of slayful, though, when she told her little straight son to sit down because he doesn't know how powerful she is. I did definitely stand up a little for that.
Yeah,
I was tell him you're stronger than her dad. No, tell him you're stronger than his dad. He needs to know. He doesn't get it. He never asks. I think it's I might be jumping ahead a little bit to the next section, but when she's I wondered how I would spin my own stories if he ever asked me, but I didn't need to worry about it.
He never asked. Real.
Yeah. Well, we need to talk about Trigon before this section is over because we're starting to run out of time. But, Telegonus grows up. There's a sailor encounter where he, kind of starts to come into his own as a teenager. We find out his special skill is being a very charismatic, charming leader, not dissimilar to his father. He knows when to turn on that charm. He's a big extrovert and he's one of the boys. He really gets along with the bros. He wants to leave and she does not want him to leave. Cue Stay With Me from Into the Woods, Act 2.
Down to a word.
And now it's time for us to go to the depths of the ocean because someone's had a little thought a brewing this whole time about what is greater than any human or god in the world. Never forget, it is scary, ancient, unseen sea monster. When you are at your lowest, never forget about Deus Ex Leviathan. You could always go to the depths of the sea and procure ancient sea magic to solve your greatest problems.
And he's not just Deus Ex Leviathan in the base sense of the existence of this creature is kind of, I mean, okay, we did prime it. It is, there was Chekhov's Leviathan, but I think that it's one level more intense in the sense that it ended up being a costless thing. Her willingness to sacrifice for her child is enough to get her what she wants, and no one else has ever been willing to sacrifice of themselves this much before. Like, she's the first and only person to ever get the poison tail on the Leviathan that can kill anyone, incapacitate a god forever.
This might be my least favorite part of the book.
I'm sorry.
It's weird. It's a weird moment.
Yeah, it really feels Deus Ex Leviathan, literally in the sense that there's no consequences, there are no costs. It's like a secret tool that's been there the whole time. Once it exists, there are parameters, there are consequences, there are dangers that we have to think about with it. But in acquiring it, it was okay. I don't know. I feel like we can move on.
I actually think the proper term would probably be Leviathan Ex Machina. I feel like.
Oh,
based on, like the
Yes.
Latin,
Yeah,
but Deus
yeah,
Ex
of
Leviathan
course.
sounds better. Leviathan Ex Machina.
Okay, this is gonna be me sounding so stupid, and I'm gonna just really expose myself. I thought it was like a fish or like a puffer fish. Is Trigon like a whale?
He's supposed to be a stingray, I believe.
A stingray
Was my
okay.
What I was getting. If anybody, this was what I was going to say though. What throws me off about this section and makes it feel like my least favorite part is that this is not really a figure I am familiar with from mythology. And so I don't have a vision for what this figure looks like or how he's been portrayed before. And it's not readily available information that's like easy to search from antiquity. Like he is mentioned in Jason and the Argonauts, Apollonius Rhodius telling the story of Jason and the Argonauts, but I couldn't really see in my brief, limited, teeny research, like a lot of like relation between Circe and Trigon. And so I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, Trinity, that like Madeline Miller is not afraid to like fill in gaps. Like this feels like a big kind of like gap fill in to me, which doesn't make it a bad thing. It just kind of it was hard to track as you're reading the story and everything feels so familiar. And then you're like, wait, what? Where are we? And what is this giant thing? And what's going on? And why are there no consequences? And Circe's like really, really, really scared. And I didn't really feel scared while reading. I kind of just had to trust her that this was this great horror and that it feels like there's no consequences, but in her perspective, the consequence is like witnessing this horror and like taking this thing. Like it's supposed to be like the defiling of innocence.
Yeah.
Which
as like
almost to me felt like as a turn and like maybe the most Jesus-y moment of this entire book, which Jenny, I've been saying this book is like the Bible the whole time and that Circe is like a goddess coming to earth as like Jesus and that she like frequently is like Jesus-like in all of her clean decisions and her purity and like
when she takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 hours to decide to let her child go out into the world, knowing that Athena is going to try to kill him and find his father, who is a deadbeat, with the help of your second ex-boyfriend, who also is a deadbeat. That was a moment where I was like, she is literally Jesus. I almost was like falling out of
in the Bible, Carter.
She's better than Jesus. I don't know. Like it was.
I'm kind of like prettier Jesus.
Like the amount of transcendent mercy, patience, selflessness that kind of transpires in a paragraph or something. I really kind of had to like hold things and stabilize myself. I was getting vertigo from the amount of holy perfectness of decision making that she was pulling out from herself. Which is an oversimplification. You know, it is a journey for her. She does threaten her child. It's scary. There's a look in his eyes. She realizes her motherhood. I can mostly follow it. But I also was a little bit like, wow, she's perfect. Like that is an almost impossible to empathize with decision because of how perfect it is and how cleanly she's able to just let her child go. To me, maybe I would just be an extreme helicopter parent, which is probably also true. But yeah, I don't know.
I'm kind of with you. I feel like sometimes it's unrealistic. There's also this whole thing with Trigon, and by the way, I very much relate to the fact that when this came in the book for the first time, I was like, "What?" Like, I'm almost robbed of the yeah. Like, it comes out of nowhere. It's a very quick passage, and we're introduced to the most dangerous figure in the world, apparently, in like a few pages. And I wish maybe there had been some like hinting at it, some reference to it earlier in the book, so that we feel the magnanimity of it when it is happening. Because you're right, like none of us know who it is, so it feels a bit like we're like, really, like all of these other characters and figures that we know of in Greek mythology, and like this is the one that is going to terrify her. Like she's just stared down Athena and she didn't even bat an eye, and then this stingray guy is like really like stressing her out. But I think what's fascinating sorry, no offense, Trigon,
You need to have like an inherent fear of the depths of the ocean and have recently watched
I
Pacific
think
Rim
that's
for this
literally
to really
what
land
it
on you.
is. It's because he's not a figure from mythology. He's a figure from something deeper than mythology, which is us all fearing the deep ocean and knowing that it is the greatest untamable power, I guess.
I want to talk about like the way that this is a big gap fill in, but it's going to have to do with what happens next week. So I think we'll talk more about that next week, and how at this point the story starts to kind of veer from maybe what we think of being the story of Odysseus in the Odyssey. I feel like, did we interrupt you, Jenny? Did you have something else you were going to say about Trigon?
Oh my God, you're so nice. No, the last thing I was going to say, it was super, super quick. It's about time. And I'm going to quickly talk about the White Lotus, which is going to sound so dumb. But
no, I was very on board with that monologue.
Okay, you know exactly what I'm about to reference. Oh, I love it. Because what I think is fascinating in how Madeline Miller depicts the grandness of Trigon as someone that we've spoken about, we probably wouldn't be familiar with, is she just emphasizes how old he is, and like that the time that she is ascribing to him gives him this innate power. And it just makes me think about time in Greek mythology, and like Kronos being such a powerful god, and he is the god of time. I just thought that that's kind of fascinating. Like the older gods they can be weakened, but there's also this inherent power. And throughout the book, you just see Circe respect all of these like kind of less prominent but older gods. This is not just in this passage, right? It's like with the monsters, and like she just has this respect for like things that have persisted. And it just reminds me maybe of like her, because time is such a big part of her journey, and like the time that passes and her strength to pass through the loneliness and to like create a life for herself across these millennia that she's proud of. I just think that's super interesting.
It also almost feels like a relationship between like witches and paganism, that like, even though these are all part of the same, these are all creatures and gods and monsters from the same pantheon, that Circe as a witch, and like witches being a part of society that really respects those who were here first, and like the natural gods and goddesses, that like Circe kind of skips past the Olympians and the Titans to think back to the original, like, who are the Leviathans? Those are my people. I am tapped into something ancient that has been here longer than the gods that you're worshiping and the current ruling class. Yeah, it's a weird section, this like little Trigon moment, but what I really like the most is the like waiting for Godot, staring down the face of like impossibility. She says, "Still I must try for my son." Even though none of this seems like she's going to be able to protect him, she goes and she gets the poison tail and says goodbye to her son. And the section ends in the same way it began, with her alone, waving goodbye on the beach to her son, this time sailing away.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is a dualism that I hadn't thought that much about at the time, but
yeah.
Same.
So, Jenny, I've been plaguing people by asking if this book is the Bible, and Circe is like Jesus, learning the lessons of what it's like to live as a human on the earth. In this parable of the section of single motherhood to protecting and saying goodbye to her son, like, what is the lesson we are meant to learn as readers of the Bible?
Wow. First of all, great framing. I hadn't thought of it like that until you mentioned it. I just think that's so smart. I think, like you said, Carter, like every decision Circe makes is the right one, is the perfect one. And at times it's unrealistic, but I think this decision is like the very, it's the qualm of motherhood. As someone who's never, had a kid, I can't speak to it, but like you gotta let your kids fly. You gotta let them go at some point in their lives, no matter how hard it is. And there is this acceptance that you probably have to have as a parent that, you know, the world is dark and dangerous and hard, but your kid's gonna have to deal with it. And potentially, not potentially, almost definitely after you have gone, like they're going to be a human in their own right, and their humanness is not tied to your humanness anymore. And I think that that's like what Circe struggles with in this moment, but she like makes the right decision, right? And lets him fly only to return sad not that long after.
Yeah. We'll get to that return next week. That was beautiful. Thank you, Kennedy. Thank you for joining us to talk about motherhood today and childhood and Leviathans. I know you love this book as much as we do, and so we're really happy to have you here. Will you please tell the people where they can find you and what you want them to find there?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Yes, thank you for having me. I literally always love coming on Seaweed Brain. It feels like coming home intellectually, and also just you guys are the best. I am Jenny. You can find me on all socials at Jenny Keja. I'm going on tour next month. If you're in Los Angeles or Chicago, I would love to give you a squeeze. The tickets are going kind of fast, so make sure to grab them. And also, I have an album out called The Rest of the Laurels, and I put out a companion novella with it that tells the story of all of the songs that weave together. It's called Katathon. You can get it digitally on my website or on Kindle. And if you like Percy Jackson, I feel like you'll really like it, because The Rest of the Laurels is a fully Greek mythology concept album. So
yeah. Stream.
Yeah.
Quick aside, are you still doing a book club?
Yes. Oh my God. No, thank you so much for reminding. We stopped that after the album came out, but I'm thinking about starting it back up again. Basically, we did this book club where we read mythology books every month. And then we actually had some of the authors come on and talk with us about the books, which was very cool for me. Jennifer Saint is another author I love. I think her best books are Atalanta and Hera, which is the new one.
Nice.
And she has a Aphrodite book coming out next year, which I'm really excited about.
Yay.
Yeah, so we might start that back up again if I have time after tour. That'd be great.
Yes. Okay, well, go see Jenny on tour, follow her on the internets, stream her music, maybe join a future book club. If the last few months have taught me anything, it's that Seaweed Brain listeners love a book club. And much like Jurassic Park, life will find a way. Book clubs will find a way. I don't care how many jobs our adult listeners are working, they're going to find a way to read for this podcast and read for external book clubs. Shout out to our Patreon Discord server book club. You can join Jenny's book club as well. And we'll be back next week to talk about the end of Circe and hit some of the discussion questions at the back of the book. So thank you so much, Jenny, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye, all.